Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you have ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. I am your host, Patty Porter. My guest hosts, Zena Zameta and Stephen Kotev, along with our guest experts, will share our experiences, raise your awareness, and give you food for thought. We will share with you problem-solving strategies no matter what your situation is. At work, with neighbors or friends, family, and business partners. Tune in or join in the conversation every Tuesday evening. Well, welcome, listeners. I am your host, Patty Porter from San Antonio, Texas. Our episode, Virtual Exchange, Renewing Civic Engagement in a Time of Unprecedented Interconnectedness, is a special 1.5-hour radio program hosted in part by the Association for Conflict Resolution for their annual conference and virtual education track. The ACR conference is live in Baltimore, Maryland as we speak. And I want to extend a special thanks to Cheryl Jameson, who's the Executive Director of ACR, our virtual track team led by Colin Rule, and Tracy Colberth-King, a special guest host for our radio program, who has her feet on the ground in Baltimore with a room of conference participants listening now. And in fact, we have a number of you in the studio on the phone and many of you in the chat room, so we welcome you here today. Now, for those of you who are joining us through the ACR virtual track or other listeners, we invite you to learn and engage with our guests from the Soliya Virtual Connect program. Now, I'm going to give you a special code for those seeking CEUs for their profession in their state, and I'll give this to you during our closing remarks. So how can you get involved in this conversation? As I mentioned, many of you are already on the phone, 347-324-3591, and press the number 1 key to let us know you would like to ask a question or make a comment. Finally, you can also participate through our Twitter feed using hashtag 2016ACR and at ACR Group on Twitter. Now, the ACR virtual participants who are already in the Slack room, and so you already know what that is, you're already in there to engage in the discussions, and we'll be looking at the Slack room and the conflict or the chat room to bring in your questions and comments. Throughout the program, we will let you know when we'll open the lines for questions, or you can press the 1 key on your phone to also let us know that you would like to speak as well. So let's get started in the program itself. In a digitally connected world, the diversity of identities is a reality, which we must confront every time we log into our smartphones and social media accounts. Grassroots intercultural dialogue programs between citizens living in different societies have flourished over the past decade as a response to the growing antagonism between some of those societies. Those programs aim at building mutual understanding and a sense of empathy among participants, creating bridges and fostering a new culture of constructive engagement between young citizens. Lately, online dialogue programs carried out by organizations like Soliya have received an official acknowledgement of their relevance in a fast-changing world. We have 2 guests today with us. The first one is Waidehi Gokhale and Rangane Azamzadeh Tosong are part of Soliya's Connect program. Now, Soliya, as stated by Waidehi, is sowing the seeds of dialogue evolution. We will talk about the lessons learned from their 13 years of experience, discuss the current evolutions of dialogue processes and the value of virtual exchange as a growing field in the world of intercultural dialogue and conflict resolution. Now, for those of you who are in the Slack room, I put the bios of our 2 guests in there, and also the program page has their full bios as well. But let me just give a brief introduction for 2 of them. Excuse me. Waidehi is the Chief Executive Officer at Soliya, and this is an international not-for-profit organization delivering innovative virtual exchange programming globally. She has 18 years of professional experience in the fields of psychology, international education, and development. Now, prior to joining Soliya in 2008, Waidehi worked as an international project manager at War Child Canada with a globally diverse portfolio of programming. Before that, she worked as a counselor on staff in high schools in the United States and as a language teacher in Singapore. Waidehi was born in India and grew up in Hong Kong. Now, Rangane Azamzadeh Tosang is the principal and founder of Soul Resolutions International, which specializes in facilitation and conflict transformation. She's in California, and she received her MA in International Policy Studies with a specialization in international conflict resolution from Monterey Institute of International Studies. She is a certified professional facilitator, a trainer with the National Conflict Resolution Center, and has over 10 years of experience facilitating diverse groups in a multitude of settings. And for the last 5 years, Rangane has served as a senior facilitator, coach, and trainer with Soliya. So now let's get started. We have the lines open for our two guests. So welcome to our program today.
Thank you so much, Patty.
Thank you, Patty.
Well, you're very, very welcome, and you have quite a few people listening in. So let's just get started with opening up with what motivated each of you in your own journey to conflict transformation.
Waidehi, would you like to start? I can also start. It's up to you.
Yeah. Why don't you take it, Rangane? I'll go after you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Patty, for having both of us here. It's really exciting to be able to be here and talk about Soliya and our experience with conflict transformation work. So what really inspired me and motivated me to go into conflict transformation from the very beginning was my early lived experience. I lived in Iran as a young person until I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I lived there during the Iran-Iraq War. And it's a very strange kind of experience to look back and say I grew up my early years in a war zone, now living in the United States in California. It seems very, very far away, but that experience is never really that far. And I think when you experience something like a war zone as a young person and you see essentially conflict at its very worst in the most extreme form, there's something inside of you that is forever impacted by that. And seeing conflict at its worst just, I think, triggered something inside of me that stayed with me throughout my life. And as I went into undergrad, I really made this commitment to do everything I can, commit my life's work to figuring out a way to ensure that no other family had to experience the same thing that my family had to experience, to have to go through that same situation. And I think looking at the state of the world now, clearly there's so much more work to happen. But the conflict transformation, seeing the potential for conflict to really emerge as something positive, something powerful, I think is really part of what made me believe that this is a field that has that can do a lot of good for the world.
Okay. I appreciate you sharing that, Rangane, because we've only just begun to really meet each other through Skype and technology, and something I didn't really know about you, and I look forward to getting to know more about that. So thank you for sharing that foundation of what caused that motivation for you. Now, Waidehi, why don't you share a little with us?
Absolutely. So I think the roots of my motivation to enter this field come also from early lived experience, although far less traumatic than Rangane's. I grew up in Hong Kong, and it was interesting to be in a place where difference was consistently seen as an opportunity as opposed to a threat. We were a very diverse community, and that level of diversity was a norm. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older and would travel back to India and have conversations with people within and outside of my family back there, and began to experience what I recognized to be some very stuck narratives that then perpetuated both fear and a lack of knowledge and stereotypes and biases that were sort of clearly the roots and propagators of the intractability of conflict. And this was at the time, was just very interesting, possibly disturbing to me. And then as I grew up and lived in various parts of the world, I realized that our norm growing up in Hong Kong and viewing difference as an opportunity was a misnomer, and that most of the world actually functioned from a place of fear when faced with difference. And I couple that with sort of just a very base fascination, if you like, in how people interact with each other. And so my concept of conflict transformation is people taking the responsibility to engage constructively across these lines of difference, and navigating the path out to the other side. And so I sort of wended my own path through fields of psychology and so on and so forth, and carried all these toolkits around with a view to cracking the nut of how can we truly enter a different space in the world, as Ranganay very eloquently said, where no family experiences the kinds of trauma that hers did. And so I would say that is where my motivation comes from.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate the story and how both of you, formed that foundation and motivation. And, and we all have those stories, right? However they come. They're not in terms of, comparing apples to apples or apple to oranges, but we all have whatever those experiences that have driven us to be here and doing the work that we do. And so one of the things, for me in introducing Soliya, because we're going to get into what is the meaning behind Soliya and what is Soliya's mission. And it's been very interesting for many people who are probably listening in or from ACR know me for many years since ACR began. And living in Delaware all those years ago, I remember when Soliya first formed. And Maria Volpe with the New York listserv would always distribute the emails inviting new facilitators to join in this virtual exchange. And what is virtual exchange? And that was back in the early mid-2000s. And when I saw that, it really piqued my interest of how can I get involved in an international way in understanding cultures. But I was just like, is this the right time for me? So every year, probably around November, I would see this email come through, and I'm like, okay, is this the right time? Is this the right place? Do I have the time to commit? And it wasn't until this year when I saw it again, the annual visit, I was like, for whatever reason, I just connected to that, and I said, okay, this is what I really need to be doing, and it's time, and it's ready, and I'm committed. And so I joined Soliya in January, and of course I'm just meeting the two of you just over the last couple of weeks for the first time. And it's been quite an experience, and I want people to understand what that experience is. So let's begin, and maybe, Waidehi, you could begin with this, but can you say a little bit about what is the meaning behind the word Soliya, and a little bit about Soliya's mission?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the word Soliya is a combination of the word sol in Latin for sun, and the word iya, which comes from ancient Arabic, and there's the word for light. The word iya is rare, but can be found in the Mulaqat, or the hanging poems, which are a collection of renowned pre-Islamic poems, actually, that hang on the Kaaba. And the name reflects the mission and aim of the organization to bridge divides and shed light on cultural differences that too often seem intractable or inevitable. For our organization, our vision would be to see a world where societies are truly pluralistic and where diversity is embraced and conflicts are transformed into opportunities for collaboration and collective learning.
Okay. So this carries forward with the theme of the conflict transformation, right? How do we embrace these differences? And the way that you're doing that is with the introduction of technology. Now, technology has certainly been around for a long time, and it continues to evolve. But the use of technology and the dialogue process and the need to build relationships and trust and understanding between global citizens, as you said, in diverse cultures, diverse countries, and it continues to evolve. So why don't we paint a picture here for those who are in the room, what these virtual dialogue sessions look and or feel like.
Sure. Would you like Rangane to go first as sort of a active facilitator to give you a sense of that, or sort of or do you want the higher level picture painted first?
Well, I think what would be great is to do the higher level picture. So it's because we have a lot of mediators, facilitators, coaches who are in the room, and probably even some of the Soliya facilitators here. So a high level in terms of what the virtual facilitation process is, how it relates to real life facilitation that the folks here might be engaging in, because for some folks they've never used virtual technology to facilitate. So just a high level in that way, and then maybe Rangane, you can talk about it in more specifics.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just to say, before I came across Soliya myself, I was a trained mediator and, understood the process of mediating conflict or working as a negotiator, and had been trained in the principles of facilitation. But frankly, I also did not necessarily understand how this would transfer into an online medium. I was not at ease with the idea that I wouldn't be sitting face-to-face with the people that I would be facilitating with. However, what Soliya has done through a pretty sort of thoughtful design process, I think, we've created a platform that brings in basic principles of engagement, dialogue, and facilitation that are the same whether you're in person or in an online medium. So in these dialogue sessions, you are visibly aware of each other. You can see one another, and the screen is laid out such that the group appears to be sitting in a circle. And so you generate the notion of a talk circle. The function of the talking stick is used as well electronically. In other words, only one person can speak in the room at one time. So that gives it a very interesting cadence to the conversation. And then the key way that we deliver on the facilitation really is the principles used by the facilitators. And so our pedagogical elements of multipartiality, not neutrality, not impartiality, but multipartiality. The facilitator is there to represent respectfully everybody in that room. And then what we call driving into the curb. So the facilitator is there not to participate, but to generate a respectful space and enable the members of the group to have the conversation. And the facilitator is encouraged to ensure that they don't skirt the conversation and that you actually go into the depths of the things that you wouldn't think you would say in order to come out of the other side, as it were. So largely the principles and the practices of facilitation are very much in line with how you would do it in a room full of people. There's an interesting dimension, I think, that comes into it because of the virtual space. Ironically, though, although you would think that people would be more removed from the process, somehow the safety of the medium seems to eventually allow people to be more engaged with the person. That's been our experience, although I would defer to Rangane, who has much more present experience with that.
All right. So before Rangane, before you move into a little bit more specifics, do clarify about multipartiality. Now, I know this is covered extensively in any training that a facilitator might want to go through for the Soliya program, but can you explain, however you would like, on what's the difference between impartiality and multipartiality?
So the key distinction in our view is that the idea that you're impartial suggests that you yourself as a facilitator do not have biases and stereotypes that enter a room with you. And our answer is that's actually impossible. And so to be multi-impartial means to have to be a very, very present sense of self that enters the room with the facilitator, and to be aware of one's own triggers and biases and types and, your own perspectives, and then to have those present with you in the face of the others that are going to be in the room as well, allowing for a knowledge of self and an acknowledgement of the fact that all of that noise is in the room with you. So that's why we choose the term multipartiality versus impartiality.
Okay, great, thank you. So Rangane, and certainly you can add to that, Rangane, in your experience as a facilitator, how multipartiality plays. But you've been more recent, you've been there 10 years, and so are more recent in facilitation in Soliya, but you've also been a trainer for Soliya and a coach to facilitators, especially new facilitators that are doing this. So could you paint the picture then of the Connects program's process and kind of the evolution of the dialogues, because it is 8 weeks of dialogues in the virtual exchange. So handing it over to you.
Great, thank you. Well, I just want to say on the note, because you brought up the notion of coaching and training, and I want to uplift one point around Soliya, and one thing that I really, really love about the organization and the Connect program especially, and this is sort of going to be one of probably many plugs I make for folks who are playing with the idea of potentially applying to be a facilitator or getting involved with Soliya. But the one thing is, if you've been facilitating or mediating or doing any type of work related to this field, and even if you haven't, Soliya has really thought so well about the folks who come in as facilitators in terms of providing such great support. So starting off with these, well-trained trainers who have tons of experience doing the virtual facilitation, all the way through through coaching, which is all there to really support folks who are interested in going into this work. And I have been hard-pressed to find that level of support in any other space. So I just want to say Soliya does such a great job of that, and I think it just makes it so much easier to really enter this and try something that for many people is so new and so different. In terms of the Connect program and sort of the evolution of how the dialogue process unfolds, I'd say the very short answer would be that you, as a facilitator, watch this group of college students, young people come into the room as strangers, and after 8 weeks, you see them leave as ambassadors across many identities for each other. So this process that you go through in 8 weeks, for many of us, we feel like 8 weeks isn't really that long, but it's just such a powerful experience. And I guess sort of the more detailed answer would be you start off by engaging the participants in getting to know each other as peers by exploring some of the sort of simpler aspects of identity, food, hobbies, interests, the things that make up your identity, but in a very simple way. And then as the weeks move forward, then you begin to move into the more complex aspects of identity. So you start to explore values, beliefs, experiences. And by the end, and when you're getting into weeks sort of 7 and 8, you really start to look at really examine the intersectionality of these identities, right? You're not just looking at gender or religion. You're looking at the intersectionality of gender and religion and perhaps politics and culture. And it really provides this complex view that pushes the participants to go deeper into how not only are they thinking and engaging with each other, but how they are thinking and engaging with themselves. And I think that's the part that's transformational about the Connect program, is that as a facilitator, as part of that, as Waidehi so beautifully said, driving into the curve, you're not going to get that if you are constantly in that space of your comfort zone, right? So from the very beginning, facilitators are guiding participants to really figure out a way to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because in that space between your comfort zone and feeling unsafe is like that discomfort, but that's the place where you are learning the most. That's the place where you're really pushing your own boundaries of thought, your own beliefs, and really digging deeper into the why behind them. And I think the Connect program has developed this really phenomenal curriculum that guides participants, supports facilitators through that entire process.
As I'm listening to what you were saying, and it's a lot that you were sharing with, it is an incredibly robust 8 weeks that's going on. And for a lot of us who are on the phone, who are in the chat room, who's in the Slack room, we have many, many years of experience as conflict resolution professionals. And there's a good mix of people who are working in the Soliya program from different backgrounds. And in doing this work for over 21 years, I found this incredibly challenging on many levels, and challenging me on my skills, challenging me on my technology, challenging me on the use of multipartiality and how does that apply in the room, challenging me as a facilitator in terms of how I'm working with a new co-facilitator who may have more or less experience than me. So there's some really rich opportunities, not only from a facilitator perspective, but from all of these students from different perspectives, different backgrounds, different ages, genders, and so all of that complexity. And technology is one of them. So one of the things is, how has the rise of technology intersected with virtual dialogue? And then we're going to open it up to the room for Q&A. So we're going to have several of those opportunities. So either one of you.
Sure. This is Waidehi. Patty, I was just going to say, I think one of the things to clarify when it comes to the use of technology for dialogue is the difference between the opportunity that technology offers up and the challenges that come with it. So in other words, you can engage in an online medium asynchronously in a fairly anonymous fashion with just about anyone from just about anywhere. And there's, the rules of engagement in that realm are fairly ambiguous, and some would argue there are none. But what that kind of engagement using technology offers is a sort of a sheltered way to really have acrimonious engagement, one, or it offers you the opportunity to be quite siloed in your engagement. So online mediums will allow people to just engage with others who, see themselves the same way, with like-minded folks, seek out reflections of their own existing perspective. Very few people will go out there to challenge themselves. And you need only look as far as the comment box of any article or any engagement online to understand quite how quickly people race to the bottom when it comes to quote-unquote online engagement. I think the difference with something like virtual exchange is that what you're encouraging people to do is meet one another face-to-face online. And that really is a game changer in many ways. And that's why facilitating exchanges such as this becomes such a rich experience, because now you're using technology to enable people who would never otherwise either seek to or have access to one another, not only have access, but be given the opportunity to build empathy for one another, to think critically about perspectives other than their own, and eventually to generate relationships. So many times in Connect program sessions, or frankly, even within the training itself, you'll have people who, are sitting in parts of the world that they may never, ever travel to, never even have heard of, and the only representations they have of any of these places in the past come through, fairly bias-driven authorship of mainstream media. So I think that's the key with the use of technology for engagement. It's about how you use it, and this particular method of using technology is very powerful.
Well, and we're going to open the lines just shortly, everyone. And what I wanted to say as a new facilitator to Soliya, what was great about, and we talked about this in Colin Rule's session a little bit earlier at the ACR conference, is having the technology support. And y'all provide a wonderful technological team from all over the world, and making sure that not only our participants who might be more isolated, who don't have great bandwidth, and supporting them and supporting the facilitators, the coaches like Rangane, who are awesome, and the trainers as well, but the coaches who are there to help us on making sure that we are keeping, the process true to what it is we're supposed to do in a multipartial world. So the support system that you provide, in addition to the experience of the dialogues, it's amazing, and raises to a whole nother level as a facilitator in this process. All right, so I am going to first go to Baltimore, and I'm going to open the line for Tracy, who has a number of people in the Baltimore session, and then I'm going to open it to those who are on the phone line, and I see that you've pressed the 1 key. So let me go to Tracy first. And Tracy, do you hear me? And Tracy, I have you on your cell phone, so if I'm supposed to hit a different line, let me know. So I've got that line open. So while she's, they've got a conference line phone and her phone, so I'm not. Tracy, are you there?
I am. I can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, so you have any questions or comments from either yourself or other participants in the room?
Does anyone have any questions? I'm here. We do not have any questions or comments.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to go to the other folks on the line, and let me know when you do, Tracy, okay, by pressing the 1 key.
Questions.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
What are some of the typical type cases you're dealing with?
So what are some of the typical cases you're dealing with? All right, thank you. So who would like to answer that?
I guess I was just, I'm wondering if we can maybe get a little bit of clarification in terms of what is meant by the type of cases.
Okay, and maybe that's part of the understanding is what are we talking about here. So, Tracy, I'm opening the line back up. So I think it was Jason or someone who was clarifying. Could you clarify what you mean by the types of cases? They're facilitated dialogue. So can you say a little bit more about the question?
What are we talking about here? So, Tracy, I'm opening the line back up. So I think it was Jason or someone. Could you clarify what you mean by the types of cases? They're facilitated dialogue. Say a little bit more about the question.
Sounds like there's a little bit of a delay. Just a moment.
Conflicts or situations are you involved with?
Okay, so I'm thinking, so the virtual exchange program is one in which students are partnered through all over the world, and there's facilitated dialogue. So maybe what the question is, Rangane or Waidehi, is what are the kinds of topics maybe? What are the kinds of conflict situations that might be discussed in these facilitated dialogues? I think that might be where they're going with.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot more sense. Thank you so much for that clarification. Waidehi, do you want to? I will default to you in a second if you like.
Sure. So I think we see. I think Rangane did a really lovely job of sort of describing the arc that the group goes through in terms of how they discuss and what they discuss. And to be honest, you see a wide range of engagement from the students. But when they, some of the very typical places where they end up are at odds around the role of religion in society, political, foreign policy, in terms of sometimes there's discussions on human rights, on societal norms, anything from, and that can be anything from race relations to sexuality to gender roles, and sometimes they end up in discussions about communal coffee culture in their countries and how it differs. And so it can range from things that are important at the micro level to things that are important and have a great impact at the macro level. It really depends on the group. And then the other thing that influences where these discussions go are big global events. So, for example, the Connect program was running, actually facilitating a group one day, and my co-facilitator and I had a plan as to what we were going to discuss with the group. And then that morning, just prior to the start of the group, the newspapers printed the picture of them pulling down the statue of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And suddenly your plan for the day goes out of the window because everybody's going to want to discuss this, and there's going to be some very interesting conversation. Or when the Dutch filmmaker made the film and you had Dutch students in the conversation at the same time with students from the Middle East, or when the Paris bombings happened and you had the Parisians in the group right alongside the rest of the world, or when the Boston Marathon bombings happened and you had a program in session. So those kinds of events certainly change the dynamics of how those conversations happen as well.
Okay. And Rangane, anything else you wanted to share about that? Well, we'll take on a couple more questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was said so well, and I think the only thing that I would add is that on that earlier note I made around the support that facilitators get, the facilitators are really providing that support right back to the participants in terms of really, this is a facilitated learning environment. So this isn't teaching, but it's facilitating learning happening about almost sort of like how to analyze some of these larger global social issues that Waidehi just outlined. So we talk about power dynamics, we talk about aspects of identity, we talk about all of these different ways to think about and engage in critical thinking around these issues. So it's not, the issues don't just go in a circular motion. Facilitators are constantly asking participants to sort of take that to a level deeper. What is the personal impact of the statue of Saddam Hussein falling? How is that impacting your society? How is that impacting your community? Wherever you are in the world, right? Like how is that, what is that connection that you're making? Because unless you are able to make it unless you're able to get folks to think about it from that personal aspect, well, if you are not getting people to think about it from that personal aspect, it's a missed opportunity. And so participants are learning these tools as they're engaging in these dialogues, and they're able to apply the tools more and more as the semester goes on, and they're able to apply those tools to more complex topics.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because, as a first-time experienced facilitator with Soliya this year, and we're getting ready to start up again another 8 weeks, one thing that was emphasized is not only is this facilitated learning environment, but the role of the facilitators helping them to empower them to take a lead in the dialogue so that they know when they go back to the communities, how can they lead and engage in these dialogues themselves. And so what was interesting for me is not only what am I having to be aware of in terms of being multipartial, for example, but what are we aware of in terms of the types of cultural perceptions or understandings about how you engage in dialogue. So you might have people who are very shy because their culture says, hey, we can't really speak up too much. So what are all the tools that we use? And also what do we do, like you said, Rangane, in terms of getting them to think critically about, let's say they put opinion out, and this opinion, and a perfect example without breaching confidentiality is, someone from the Western society said, this is my belief and understanding about X in your religion, and so they stated the opinion, and the folks from that practice that religion and that culture said, why do you believe it to be that way? And they said, well, Wikipedia said, which was very interesting because they're like, don't use Wikipedia. Let us share with you what our reality and truth is about that. And so for them, that, when you look about critically thinking, where are we educating, where are we getting our information that informs us, and oftentimes those sources aren't the sources to be really learning. We really have to think, where are we getting this understanding from media, from Wikipedia, from, hearsay, things of that nature. And so that was another very interesting element in my experience as a new facilitator for Soliya. Now, I want to go back to multipartiality because we have a question in the Slack room, and I know we have another person in the studio who has a question, and that person, just to prepare you, is coming from the area code 707, so I'll come to you next. And so in the Slack room, I think this whole concept of multipartiality is really striking some curiosity, and the gentleman or the person in the room said, I understood it included acknowledging the unconscious bias of the neutral. Does it also involve any unconscious bias in the process as well as the people? So that's the question. Does multipartiality also involve any unconscious bias in the process as well as the people?
Franganay, do you want to take that? That's a great question.
I'm like marinating. I was like, wow, I'm going to have to marinate on that question.
I love that, marinating, right?
That's quite a bit. I think that it does, in the sense, as much as it can, right? So the things that live in our subconscious, we're not always, we don't know what we don't know. Right? But I think that the process of asking questions and normalizing asking questions, so that we are bringing up all the different aspects of the process, of the people, of what we're really trying to accomplish in this dialogue. I think inherent in multipartiality is the element of asking those questions. So I think, one thing that immediately came to mind, and I'm not totally sure if this answers the question directly, but it's sort of calling out all the different aspects. So part of the way that Soliya works is, and this goes back to something that Waidehi had mentioned in terms of the question around rise of technology and virtual dialogue, the opportunity and the challenge. So one thing that facilitators will oftentimes call out is sort of the power dynamic inherent in using virtual technology, right? Because not everywhere in the world has equal access or has the same type of access to technology that is reliable. And so that creates a different dynamic in the room if you are constantly trying to talk about something and your mic isn't working, or your video is freezing, or your sound isn't working at all. And so your voice is constantly, being cut off or not being heard in the same way as someone who has completely reliable Wi-Fi or has completely reliable internet and, is not having any tech issues. So part of that, part of calling that out is calling out something that perhaps people are not even really thinking about necessarily in the process. But again, you kind of don't know what you don't know. But I think for the most part, we are trying to get to surfacing the things we don't know through asking questions. Waidehi, I'll pass it to you to see if you have any different thoughts.
No, I have the same reaction as you, in that that's a good question. And there's a lot to it. But the very thing that you mentioned, I think, is the core of that, which is to identify and name dynamics that have impact on the process. And the way to do it very much so is through asking good questions, which is a key element of the facilitation model. And frankly, what surfaces could be organically different from one group to another, depending on who's there and both the personalities as well as the cultures that are engaged. And so, it's certainly something to keep you on your toes. But in short, yes, I think you're going to think about what's involved with the process as well as the people.
All right, great. Thank you. We have a caller from area code 707. Do you still have a question or comment you'd like to post?
Hi, can you hear me? It's Lorraine Siegel in Northern California.
Yes, hi, Lorraine. Go ahead, Lorraine.
Yes, thank you. I want to make a quick comment and ask a question. I just think it's a beautiful program, and I just commend you and love the term multipartiality. And my question is, as a teacher and facilitator myself, I'm always looking for good activities and ways to build safety and build empathy. And I wondered if you had any specific examples of exercises or techniques you found that help people feel more safe to share their truth.
Thank you, Lorraine.
I'll just say briefly. Yeah, I'll just say briefly that in my experience, sharing your truth requires someone to feel, incredibly safe, but also quite brave. And I think that the safety element of it, the facilitators bring to the room through just very, again, open discussions around the dynamics. There are ground rules that are set up within the group. It's very explicitly stated that the end goal ought to be that everybody feels able to bring their truth into the room. And so I think that the sort of setup of the room is such that it allows that safety. And then beyond that, there are discussion like little games and little activities that do take place, although I think a large part of it is just the psychology of the group process, letting them get to know each other a little bit before pushing forward with some of the dialogue. And my experience has always been that the rhythm of the group is driven by the group. And so you sort of know when they're ready to get to that place of sharing. Frankly, not everybody gets there at the same time. And so that's the challenge of facilitation for you. But the basis of everything is the agreed upon ground rules and motivation as to why everybody, wants to engage in the process type thing.
Okay, great. All right, so I have a couple of questions from Eric in our chat room, and I'll mention both of them, but I'm hoping that both of you will also share a favorite experience. The first question from Eric was, what social issue would you tackle if money and time weren't a problem? And the second follow-up is to share your favorite or memorable experience of Soliya.
Oh boy, those are both really great questions, also requiring marination time. So the first question is, what social issue would we tackle if time and money were not an issue?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, I can start with that. I don't know that I have a specific social issue that I would say necessarily. In the context of Soliya, I think part of the beauty of the design of the program is that we're really looking to the participants to lead with their interests, where their energy and their momentum is. And so it's usually we will be asking them, what are the topics and issues that you are most interested in discussing, and we just sort of build the session around the answers to that question. And so I might have a personal answer to that question that I'm happy to offer offline, but in the context of Soliya, I think we're really looking to the participants to guide that the answer to that question. And then in terms of a favorite, memorable Soliya moment, I don't know if I really have one singular one that I can think of. I think there was one group I worked with a couple of years ago. I even remember the group number actually, and it was this really amazing group that just and this, as Waidehi mentioned earlier, every group is completely different. The makeup composition is just so different for every group. But this particular group really, really bonded over the course of the 8 weeks that they were in dialogue with each other, and to see the richness of the relationships that came out of that experience at the end of those 8 weeks was one of my favorite memories. Just seeing all of the love and respect and appreciation for the moments of enlightenment, for the moments of discomfort, for the moments of curiosity, for the moments of confusion. It was just the whole package, and the relationships that came out of that were just really, really very solid. And to see that evolution in something like an 8-week time frame is not common. I think, especially across virtual lines. This was across multiple countries, and so I think that was probably one of my favorite, most memorable, maybe not a moment, but experiences.
Thank you, Rangane. And what about you, Waidehi?
Again, it's hard when you've sort of had experiences with so many different groups to sort of pick one particular moment. But I think the things that stick in my mind are always that moment when you see someone have their aha moment. And that can range from, the student in Western Kentucky who has never thought about leaving Western Kentucky until engaging in a group dialogue process like this and realizing that there is in him a desire to experience what life is like outside of his hometown, and watching that transformation happen. Or I had a young man who was, very committed to the foreign policy of the Bush Jr. presidency, and he was very skeptical of a young woman who wore the hijab who was in the same group as him, and she too was very skeptical of him. And they spent all 8 weeks, in fact I think the program may have been 9 weeks long at the time, sort of dancing around each other and engaging in issues and immediately hitting points of contention on everything from political issues to social issues. This was a kid who was calling them freedom fries, and he was a kid who wouldn't cross the border to Canada because they didn't support U.S. military action at the time, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the groups, this young man asked her very respectfully if he could have her mailing address. And they kept in touch. And the professor who was doing the Soliya sessions at the time at this one university had since moved to a different campus. And I spoke to him a few years ago, and he not only remembered this young man, the same man who was in this group that I described, but he remembers hearing from him after graduation and receiving word that he went to the Middle East and met this young lady in person. And, if you think about where he started and where he came out, it's extraordinary. But I have to say that the most important thing from our perspective is not necessarily that, a young man it doesn't matter to me whether he started referring to them as French fries, having decided he was not going to do so. What matters to me is that he recognizes that there is space in the world for perspectives that are different and that they can live together and that they do not have to be in a zero-sum oppositional game all the time. And that's really the end game. It's not about changing people's minds. It's about respecting that there are other minds and that that's okay.
So powerful. Just get goosebumps listening to the stories that both of you had, and even just reflecting back on my own first experience, and what was interesting for me as a facilitator was not only seeing some of these dynamics move over the 8 weeks, and as you said, everyone moves in different paces and spaces in terms of what they're willing to share, whether it was something traumatic. In fact, while we were in the groups, there had been some recent bombings in the town and that were the students in our group, and so they were very concerned, of course, for these students, and so it was bringing this level of real connectedness to these individuals and students, but everyone went at a different pace. And what was interesting, too, as a facilitator is that, you're in a place of curiosity to help them learn these skills and engage in a different way, and as you said, come to an understanding, not to try to convince them to change their minds, but to a better understanding. But I learned so much myself outside of being a facilitator, just learned about some of these other cultures myself that I didn't even know I didn't know. And I think that was very true for all the students there about whether they had misgivings, misperceptions of the Western society or Americans or from the other countries, because there's a number of countries involved. So we're going to go on to a couple more questions for the two of you, Waidehi and Rangane, to address, but we're at a little over the halfway point here. And for those listeners listening to our normal regular radio show, you are listening to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. And this is part of a special episode for the Association for Conflict Resolution's annual conference in Baltimore. And I'm speaking with Waidehi and Rangane with Soliya's Virtual Connect program. And so we're going to continue the conversation. And what I wanted to ask the two of you is the dialogue process the same today as it was in the 2000s? So how has it changed? How is it the same?
So I think the one key thing that maybe evolved a little bit for us in terms of the core focus is that when Soliya was originated, the founders were very keen on bringing together young people, specifically from the United States and the Arab region. And as the programming grew and as, frankly, the world shifted, it became really apparent that this ability, this exposure to difference and to being able to engage constructively with all kinds of difference is really at this point more of a must-have life skill. It's very hard to imagine a young person who's going to be in any kind of community or workplace where they won't be expected somehow to engage constructively with someone who's quite different to themselves in whatever way, whatever line of difference you want to think about. And so we realized that the relevance of this programming was much more global in many ways, and that it's really about the process. And so our geography shifted to include Europe and South and Southeast Asia, and we've iterated on the programming model to continuously ensure that the program outcomes are front and center. So, the kinds of things that we wanted to have impact on was levels of empathy, curiosity, the attitude that's required to approach something with a critical mind frame, the notion that self-awareness is incredibly important, the ability to listen actively, the ability to communicate across various cultural lines. And so we make sure that the support provided to the facilitators, as well as the approach taken with the dialogue, then keeps in time with those objectives, if you like.
Thank you. And Rangane, anything else that you would like to add about how the process itself? Because you've been with Soliya, I believe, for 10 years. So as a facilitator, trainer, and coach, so have you seen any dynamic changes in the process or the technology?
Well, so it's just to be totally transparent, I've actually only been with Soliya for about 6 years. My goal is 10 plus, but 6. I think Waidehi laid it out really beautifully. I think this went as, I think when the program started, it was, an opportunity for engagement, and I feel like the skills and the process and the experience is something, as she said so greatly, is a life skill. And I think as we continue to see the world, as the world continues to feel like it's getting smaller in many ways, and we are faced with interfacing with people that are that do have so many differences across so many different identities, and we look at, even in the United States, the projection is that by 2042, 2044, the United States will become a majority-minority country. And that's not just true for the United States, but I feel like this does become a life skill. This does become sort of like the rules of engagement of how do we engage with each other from an expanded awareness, from an open mind and open heart, from a place of reaching for empathy, and for a place of reaching for understanding over agreement, which is one of the core principles that Soliya talks about. So yeah, I don't know that I would add a whole lot more. I think that was really well said, and I do think it has become I think it has become a life skill.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I also understand that you're, as technology also evolves, I know that y'all are working very hard on upgrading, updating, customizing your platform. I'm excited about that coming about in February 2017 or sometime next spring 2017. Now, one of the things, Rangane, we talked about in some of our own planning sessions is around generational differences. And so how do generational differences intersect with how we engage in dialogue today, especially because a lot of the Soliya program are undergraduates in a lot of universities. So say more about that and what you've experienced.
Yeah, I think the generational differences are really fascinating to me from multiple different views, but I think one is sort of you see this large influx of millennials coming into the workforce, into higher education, and then you have sort of the juxtaposition against the baby boomer generation and the silent generation before that. And when you think about, and this is sort of back to like the sort of that core the core evolution of how the dialogue process evolves, where you're learning about people's values, beliefs, and experiences, and generations carry, even as a broader perspective at the macro level, each generation sort of has inherent in it its own set of values and beliefs based off of what that generation was experiencing. And so for the millennial generation, technology has been a way of life. That's not necessarily been really something that's been learned. That was just something that was always there. I'm on the older end of the millennial generation, so I had to do a little bit of learning. But for those who are sort of in the middle and the younger end of things, that technology has just been such a part of life, such a way of life. And so I think the Connect program is essentially really meeting millennials where they are with that comfort, with that medium, with that platform of where they are engaging, where they are communicating. And so there's been some adjustment for Gen X and for baby boomers to figure out that technology piece. But I think that if you're ever going to really take it on and really integrate it into a field such as facilitation or conflict transformation, Soliya is sort of the place to do it because there's so much support around it. And they are, really Soliya is just like on the cutting edge of bringing together technology, facilitation, conflict transformation. That intersection is not a space that has been, in my mind, really utilized to the maximum potential, and Soliya is sort of on the pioneering end of that. It's so innovative what the organization is doing with that intersection, and I think it's why it's been so effective. It's why there are so many young people who are engaging in this space, and I think generational differences will continue to be something to really think about as Gen Xers decide to engage as facilitators, or as even maybe baby boomers decide that they want to become facilitators. There is space for that. There is support for that, and it continues to be an intersection that I think just holds so much promise.
Well, folks, we will also talk about how you get involved with Soliya as a facilitator, or even for those of you who are at universities, we'll talk a little bit about university partnerships, institutional partnerships. So we definitely will answer that question for sure. That has been coming up in the room. And, depending on who you speak to, people might say, or I might say, I'm a baby boomer or a Gen X. I'd be at the very older end of Gen X. And I've had to be courageous, not having grown up with a computer, in elementary school, no such thing. But I've really pushed myself to really say not to be afraid of it. And so I've learned so much from, millennials and even some of the younger Gen X's about the tools, and which is, again, why I love about the virtual track at ACR, because Colin and Rule and Jason Gershowitz, who's been leading the charge with learning about all these tools, even using the Slack room today for ACR discussions, how do we bring all that in? And Soliya what was also interesting about some of the technology and the dialogue is that it wasn't that we were on for 2 hours every week with this group and then that was it and we never saw them again until the next week. There are platforms that Soliya has to keep engaged if they choose to do so. There's ways to write a little bit about yourself or your bio so people get to know who you are. And so Soliya has so many ways. There are Google, forums that they have. So many ways to continue to engage between each week and even long after. And so using, really capitalizing all that. So I've learned so much myself. I'm going to open the room again for Q&A and see if anybody is out there, see if there's any comments. And when I say comments, what's just coming up for you? What's resonating for you about what you're hearing that's like, wow, I'd never thought of it that way, or, oh, this is interesting, or even, oh, my gosh, that's so scary. How do I multitask and use all this technology, and yet I so much want to be involved in something like this? So it could be any kind of comment, or you can type it in the chat box or certainly in the Slack room. So let me go. Lorraine, it looks like your line is back open again. Let me see if you have a question. So, Lorraine, did you still have a question?
No, thank you. I'm not sure how to close it. I didn't push it again.
That's okay. No problem. Thank you, Lorraine. Okay, now remember, if you do have a question, press the 1 key if you're on the phone, and that will let me know to open your line. And Lorraine, I still see yours out. I don't know how to clear it out, but that's okay. And just press the 1 key. Let me see if there's anything in the Slack room. Not right now. I might have something from Tracy. They had to go to a different process here. They're still listening and curious, so no particular questions at that moment now. So let's, Waidehi, anything coming up for you right now that you wanted to add to what Rangane say about generational differences?
I was just going to say that I think what Rangane said was great. I do think, just to reiterate that when I was first asked to join the facilitation training, when I started to volunteer with Soliya back in 2003, the message that I received was, we'll be training in this room, but there was no physical address. And I was thoroughly confused. And I actually just didn't understand how I could be in a room that didn't have walls and a ceiling and a floor, So I think that it's all learnable, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And it has advanced to an incredible place at this point in terms of the tangible experience of what it means to engage with other people through technology. And I think that at this point, we're in a place where generationally, certainly, you could argue that for some people, their communities are almost more online than they are off, and that they engage with more people and for longer amounts of time online than they don't. And so I think this is a moment where it's sort of imperative for all generations to cross-thread these skills. So as much as it is important for young people to know how to engage face-to-face and eye-to-eye, it's equally important for cross-generational engagement to happen using technology, because that's really, where the world's going.
Thank you, Waidehi. Now, I do have a couple of comments that I wanted to share with you from the Slack room, and so let me just read them here to share it with everybody. So Colin Rule, he says, I find this program very inspirational. I have a real need in my heart for this kind of work, and I'm filled with admiration for the folks who created and managed this initiative. And he goes on to say, I must say that these kinds of conversations are intimidating for me to consider joining. I'm a little nervous about the idea of participating because I'd hate to say the wrong thing or have someone take offense. But the only way to confront those fears and to have the engagements that I think are so needed these days is to overcome the resistance and take the leap to get involved. So wanted to share that with you.
That's a wonderful testament to the work, and I would say, that's really the function of the training that Soliya offers, is very much to to empower folks who do want to wade into the waters of and take the responsibility to engage, across life, really, in these kinds of conversations. That's truly what that training is about. So be unafraid. Join the training is what I would say.
You're so right. The trainers, and Rangane's one of the trainers, of course, and I had some exceptional trainers who are in our room, and we had people from, I had a group from people from Canada, from Norwegian areas that were in the room, because they're small, intimate training groups, multiple ones going on at the same time, and like Colin would say, he's wrestling with this, overcoming this resistance. How scary is this? And like you said, be brave and be unafraid. And what the trainers did in those intense, advanced trainings, not only were you in the training for several hours each week, once a week, and then there was homework. They really pushed your skill level. They really challenged your own critical thinking. And one of the things that was a big part of our training that was very helpful to me is they had us really tap into, we would journal, and we would tap into what is the thing that we fear most that we will compromise in our neutrality or in our role as facilitator when we get into these groups. And for me, what I wrote about was, okay, I'm an independent woman. I'm married, come from a Western culture, I think very independently. But I had these perceptions of what are women's roles and women's rights in other countries, regardless of religion. And so I kept thinking, man, if I get into a group that I'm facilitating and we have males and females, it's a mixed group, and if the male says, well, in our country, the right of the woman is to stay quiet. And in fact, in our first dialogue group, my first dialogue group, I've only had one, a couple of the males said, because we said to the group, it's your responsibility to learn how to take a lead. What would it mean for you, the group, to take a leadership role? And what was happening in the chat space and in some of the conversation is, from the male side, was, do women have a leadership role in these dialogue sessions? Well, that was an interesting question, and we were waiting for someone to say, is that something to talk about? They were doing this in the chat when it was right at the very end of our session before we met the following week. And so we asked them to think about the question that was being posed, and let's talk about it when we came back. When we came back the next week, interestingly, we thought, my co-facilitator and I were like, okay, let's see if they bring it up first. And sure enough, the woman said, one of the women participants, she happened to be in the Western culture, and she says, I want to go back to the question that was posed that women cannot take a leadership role in this dialogue because that's not their place. And so that was one of my triggers in the training is, what if this comes out, and because I feel so strongly that women can be anything they want to be and have a voice and have a right, and, an equal, but that's not the same perception and culture and beliefs that a lot of other countries share. And so I had to be very careful about that. And when that came up on that particular dialogue session, this was toward the end, I was really checking myself, really checking myself. And my co-fac, who already knew that about me, we would talk about it in our debrief. She goes, how are you doing? And we had a coach, and she happened to be on that particular session observing quietly behind the scenes. And so she gave me great feedback, and she said, you handled that so well, but you have to have a level of awareness. And that was one of my fears, Colin, was, oh my gosh, am I going to totally lose it, and in my mind, but I knew I probably wouldn't lose it in the room, but would I lose my partiality or my multipartiality? So anyways, I'll shut up. That's what I wanted to share.
Well, Patty, this is Rangane. I want to say thank you so much for sharing that experience, because I think that's probably something that many Soliya facilitators can empathize with. And I think to the comment that Colin made, I really appreciate that comment. And two, I invite Colin to consider that concern, that fear, as an opportunity for empathy. And empathy in the sense that there are so many students who I think are also very intrigued by the Soliya Connect program, but also have a very similar fear. Well, what if I offend another student? What if I offend someone? Or what if no one in there agrees with anything I say? Or, and I think that all of those concerns, all of those fears are so natural coming into the Connect program, and I think that's part of what makes it so powerful is because you come in with those thoughts and those feelings, and you're actually guided through learning tools on how to deal with those concerns and how to deal with those fears in a constructive way with other people. And so, it may be potentially in a slightly different way, but I think participants and facilitators alike oftentimes come in with that. And I would certainly encourage you to not let that be a reason for not getting involved, because you will be entering a community of support around how to address and think through those fears and concerns.
Well, absolutely, the support is there. We had another comment in the chat room from Jim Levy, and he said, this program is wonderful. I'm absolutely going to look into the training and participating. Thank you to the guest and the host as he starts to head out. And I want to make sure that we definitely have time. We have about 10 minutes left before the program ends. I can't believe how quickly this is happening. And so my question, and I do want to go back to the question of your lessons learned over the 13 years, but before we do that, before people start leaving, where do you, Soliya, where do you see yourself going? And for you facilitators and mediators, where do you see yourself going next with Soliya? So maybe some information about, Soliya, about your own next steps. What could you help with facilitators and mediators or even coaches that are listening in about where they might see themselves going with Soliya and how they get involved?
Sure, I'd be happy to. For me personally, I view this as something that needs to be available to all young people everywhere. The chance to have this exposure, to have this kind of engagement, to counter the tide that seems to be sweeping across the globe really at the moment. And so for us at Soliya, we've spent many years learning and honing this model. We've spent many years and much engagement in designing the platform. We've built this incredible community of people who've been engaging with us. And I think at this point, our imperative is to grow, to take this program, to make it something that is made available on all campuses where all young people have the opportunity to have this experience. And in order to do that, our key aims are to have people learn about it, to have people engage in the training, to have more campuses understand it as a great opportunity to offer to their students. Obviously one key way to empower young people with these skills, I refer to them as life skills, and I have to say that many times they get referred to as soft skills. Can you talk to people? Can you have empathy, et cetera, et cetera? And I'm trying to change that and have people start referring to these as power skills, because that's how I view them. But in order for more young people to be able to build these skills, because you can't put everybody on planes and send them abroad. It's just impossible. And yet the value is so clear. And so why not, instead of 1% of every college campus having their students go have a study abroad experience, why not have 100% of your campus have a virtual exchange experience? It'll change the ethos of the campus. Which is what we start hearing as campuses engage more and more in the programming, And so for Soliya, it's that. It's let's reach everybody. Let's give everybody this opportunity, and let's transform how we engage.
Thank you. There's a couple more comments that came into the Slack room. Lorraine was saying, if I can internally frame people's prejudices as a gentle learning or teaching opportunity for them and me, I'm able to listen and communicate my perspective with more calm and ease. And Tammy was saying in the Slack room that was reassuring what you were just talking about there, Waidehi. Now, okay, so how do facilitators and mediators, I have been posting the link for them right now about how they become a facilitator. What is it that you're looking for? Because I know you're looking to grow the program. So say a little bit more about that if people want to get involved.
Sure. So to grow the program, we need two things. We need, more campuses taking it on board and making it an offering to their students, and then we need facilitators who are training and willing to engage. And so the facilitation training, we have two levels of it. I think for this audience, the advanced facilitation training is certainly the right mode. The advanced facilitation training runs about 4 times a year. It's done online, so it's very accessible. Very much like the exchange program. And there's a very simple application process that happens via our website through the Get Involved section, and you submit your letter of interest, and then likely you will receive an interview and be placed in the training program. And we try our very best to help people do the training through scholarships as much as we possibly can, so we try and make it as accessible as possible. But I would invite those of you who are interested to have a go, to put in an application.
And
okay, great. Thank you.
I just want to add to that, if that's okay, Patty.
Yeah.
The latter part of your first question of where do you see facilitators, mediators going next, and to this point of applying to the Soliya program, I'm a firm believer, whether you've been facilitating or mediating for 2 years or for 20 years, there is always going to be something new to learn through this training program. Because, again, that intersection of technology, facilitation, conflict transformation, dialogue, it's rich, it's new, it's on the edge of social innovation. And so you're bringing in this incredible skill set, this incredible sense of experience if you've been doing this work for a while, but you're getting to apply that in such a new and different context. So I think if you're really looking to develop yourself professionally or really just try something very different, something that you've been doing in a very different way, this is certainly going to be that opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much. So we just have about 5 minutes remaining, and I want to ask one other question, and then we'll do some closing things. So the question I have is, over the 13 years, what would you say is the top 1 or 2 lessons learned in the Soliya's journey from either of your perspectives?
I can, Waidehi, if you're okay with that, I can just sort of share. I have a pretty short answer to that. I've only been with Soliya for about half of its life journey, so I'll look to Waidehi to provide sort of that longer-term scope. But I think one thing that I've carried away many things from my 6 years with Soliya, but one thing that I continue to be reminded of every single time I'm engaging with Soliya as a facilitator, as a coach, as a trainer, in whatever capacity, is the absolute power of connection and the absolute power of relationships. How those can actually transform our lives, how they can transform our perspectives. And it sounds so simple, but it really isn't. And when we think about the way that the world, the current state of the world, the current strain that the world is facing in so many different regards, and thinking about how different things would be, how different things can be if we are more connected, if we are in relationship with one another, in community with one another. And I think that is the opportunity that Soliya offers. And not only is that offering there, but it's happening for the next generation of leaders. We're talking about young people who are going to be leaders of their communities, leaders of their countries. And if we are offering this opportunity to be connected, to be in relationship, that has a long-term impact. That has a long-term potential that, Waidehi or myself or you, Patty, or any one of us who are working with Soliya right now will potentially never know, right? This can outlive our lives, but the ripple effect of that is there. The ripple of the potential of that impact continues to blossom every semester. The Connect program runs in 100 universities. So I think that has been the greatest reminder and takeaway for me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Waidehi.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think our big, well, I don't know. I mean, I struggle to think of just one or two lessons learned. There are so many, but I'd say that the key thing that we have committed to, and I think you could view it as a lesson learned that then resulted in an ongoing commitment, is that we feel that it's desperately important for us to have a communication loop that goes between us and all the folks who are engaged with this work. And so that's the students, the professors, the coordinators, the facilitators, and so on and so forth. And we do that because we want to ensure that the program model, the program content remains relevant and that it's having an impact. And so we, and Rang and I will attest to this, we almost ad nauseum request feedback so that we ensure that that is the case. We feel a great responsibility to the people who are engaging, because the quality of that experience is the thing that, in my view, could change the world, right? It's that ripple effect. So the fact that every individual who engages with this programming has an experience that makes them think, and then that they take that thinking with them to the next person that they engage with, that really is the ultimate win for us. And so I think we've sort of turned our lesson learned into an action, and that action is this feedback loop, which we value greatly.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to be starting to do our closing now as it's getting near people leaving and heading to the next sessions. First, I want to say thank you so much, listeners, chat box folks, Twitter folks, ACR folks at the Baltimore Room, for coming in and engaging with us in all the various ways of technology. And a huge thank you to Waidehi and Rangane with Soliya for being part of this program today to educate us, to help us understand, to learn what you have been growing and doing and engaging in very cutting-edge ways through technology and bringing people together from all over the world to make it more accessible. And so I thank you so much for being part of this program. A couple of closing things. First, if you are part of the ACR group and are looking for your CEUs, you have to have this tracking code, which is 16ACR987. And so if you need that, you'll need that code and go through ACR so you can get your CEU credits for that 16ACR987. Again, you can go to Soliya, SOLIYA.net for information about Soliya, the Virtual Connect program, university partnerships, and becoming a facilitator. And I didn't know, but Waidehi or Rangane, did either of you come to a kind of a homework assignment? This is very traditional on our radio program, and then we give listeners the next step that they need to take. So what would you recommend as their next step today?
Oh, I get to assign homework? That's fantastic. I would ask listeners to be curious about this notion of virtual exchange. I would ask them to be curious enough to look it up, to read about it, to think about whether or not they would want to be engaged, and then I would ask them to talk to people about it. Is it possible for us to inoculate this whole next generation against the narratives that rise from fear that are currently causing chaos? And if it's possible, then is virtual exchange the way to do that? So I would ask people to ponder that and get engaged.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Any final message from either of you before we close out?
I think I would just say I would encourage people to keep in mind that engaging someone in one meaningful dialogue has the power to shift more for those involved than 100 casual conversations. And I think that's the opportunity that you're looking to engage when you look at Soliya's Connect program. So I would just leave with that.
Thank you. And Waidehi, last final message for you.
So thank you so much for having us and for getting the word out about what we do. And I hope that folks are moved to join the movement, as it were.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being part of our program tonight and today, and we will speak at another time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Patty.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you enjoyed the program. You can find all of our podcasts archived to listen at your convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. You can also become a Facebook fan of Conflict Connection or Twitter me at TX Conflict Coach.